Hey, Steve Wyche, settle something for me and Michael, please. We were having a pretty spirited conversation earlier about the Arizona Cardinals collapses the last 2 years and Kliff Kingsbury's record of his teams falling off a cliff going back to Texas Tech. Michael brought up some great points about the circumstances around last year and this year being unique to each one of those, right? I'm looking at the fact that Kliff Kingsbury is going into a contract year, and I don't believe if you're the Arizona Cardinals, if you're serious about contending, you can look at the last 2 years and feel good about committing to Kliff Kingsbury long term. Is that an overreaction on my part?
I don't think so. Look, you saw it at Texas Tech. You saw it the past 2 years here. And I remember covering the Atlanta Falcons when Jim Mora, the son, was coaching the Falcons. They always get out to these great starts. You know, one year it got them to the NFC Championship before they lost to the Eagles. But after that, they would finish, say, 2-5 or 2-6 and either barely make the playoffs or not make it. And so all of a sudden they started to see a trend. And so they did their research to see, okay, is he over-practicing these guys? And, you know, these guys aren't, you know, they just can't hold up, or our team's just figuring us out. We're not adjusting, and that was more of what went into it. Okay, and then Jim, of course, had some comments on a radio show that led to his dismissal. But a lot of owners, a lot of smart people say this is a trend, something wherever this guy goes, he's coaching away to where they don't hold up. And the thing is, once they lost DeAndre Hopkins about 6 weeks ago, it was like the basketball player with no left hand, right? They had no alternative way to get the layup. They had no alternative way to make buckets. They couldn't figure it out. So that's something that's going to go into this. And let's also not forget, this is just kind of out there a little bit. Remember when Lincoln Riley took the job at USC and all of a sudden within like minutes, you heard Kliff Kingsbury's name going to Oklahoma?
The good old
you guys know this.
Game,
those things don't just show up now. Those are plans coming from an agent or something else. So we'll see over the next day or two what Cardinals ownership thinks. But I do know last year that they were not pleased with the way that the team collapsed down the stretch. Now, they saw a great jump in victories. They made the playoffs this year, so it's not a complete failure. So you have an ascending team, though, that just isn't ascending at the right time, as we're seeing the teams that won this weekend have.
Yeah, Michael, that's one thing I know. That's one thing to add to your list. Is what we didn't. I don't think we mentioned that earlier, Michael. That's one thing I definitely underestimated. I thought they had enough firepower, Holly, to withstand the loss of arguably the best receiver in the NFL, and DeAndre Hopkins. Clearly not. They were a different team.
Yeah, I thought so too, fellas. But my point, Steve, is what do we think the Arizona Cardinals are without Kliff Kingsbury? So if you take Kingsbury out of the mix, I don't think we're looking at, to go old school here, I don't think we're looking at a situation where Tony Dungy leaves Tampa Bay and John Gruden, the now disgraced John Gruden, goes into Tampa and takes that Super Bowl ready roster and pushes them over the edge. I don't see that with the Cardinals. So I guess my disagreement with you fellas is that I don't think the Cardinals are fully formed yet, with or without Kliff Kingsbury. Do you agree with me?
Well, I mean, that may be a point too. I mean, but at the same time, you know, we've been having this conversation about the Rams all year. Oh, they're going all in. They're going to get Von Miller. They're going to get Odell Beckham. They're going to get Matthew Stafford and Sony Michel. But before the season, we were saying the Cardinals were going all in when they went and got A.J. Green and J.J. Watt and some other players. So, no, they're not fully formed, but they are pretty well formed for a quarterback on a rookie contract, right? They have developed a pretty good roster. You know, guys like Christian Kirk, they had a good draft. Rondale Moore, the rookie wide receiver out of Purdue. They had some players there. Remember, they did win a lot of games early in the season. They had a lot of talent to put teams to the woodshed early in the season. But down the stretch, again, are you making the adjustments that you have to make? That defense is loaded with talent, right? So I don't know how much more moves you can make. But you better make them now because you got a quarterback on a rookie contract. Because as good as Kyler Murray is, he can make $38 million by the time his deal comes up. And so there could be a prohibitive when it comes that way.
We've been focused on Kliff Kingsbury, but maybe it's a Kyler Murray conversation. Could it be, and Michael, this is kind of coming more toward your line of thinking about just this being part of the process. Could it be that Kyler Murray is just growing up. And this was his first taste of the playoffs. He was overwhelmed. He didn't play well. Kliff Kingsbury didn't throw that pick six from the end zone. Could it just be that they ran up against a better, more mature team, and the quarterback is having to grow? And this is just part of the evolution of an organization. Like maybe they are right on schedule, as ugly as they finish, and as much as Kliff Kingsbury has a pattern of his teams faltering in the second half. Was it last night just a matter of the Rams are good, B, Kyler Murray just ain't that guy yet. As much as we want to talk about him being next, an MVP candidate, was last night more about Kyler Murray than it was about Kliff Kingsbury, Steve?
It very well could have been. It very well could have been. I mean, that's a really good point because, look, he's just in his third year. We've been in this game long enough, guys, like how many teams we had to go through it. We had to take that L in the first round for everybody to understand the magnitude of what the big game really is like at this level. Because all week coming in, Kyler Murray was like, look, I was raised for the big game. I was raised for the big moment. Well, we saw in that game last night when everything didn't work out right that he didn't play well. I mean, it wasn't all on him. I mean, it was a catastrophe in a lot of different areas for the Arizona Cardinals. But, again, he is maturing. He's got to understand. But, the coaches and everybody have to help him out along the way. But more importantly, to your point, Mike, they just faced a better ball club. I mean, it was point blank. All things being equal, the Rams are a better ball club, a more seasoned ball club with more stars than the Arizona Cardinals.
Let's talk about the Rams for a second, Steve, because I think I've made this comment about them, and I think a lot of people do. You just said it. They're a star-studded team, and it's really easy to focus on their stars, starting with, an Aaron Donald and a Jalen Ramsey, like in Cooper Kupp, like these big time, especially in the case of Donald and Kupp, homegrown guys. But there's a cast-off chip on their shoulder aspect to the Rams too. Sony Michel was just given away by New England, and Matthew Stafford, he wasn't given away, but it was this feeling that, okay, you can only go so far with Matthew Stafford. And, of course, in season, Odell Beckham Jr. How do you characterize the Rams? Are they the star-studded group, or do you look at the underside there, those guys that I mentioned with something to prove? Just tell me about this team from your perspective.
Well, they'll have something to prove. And Jalen Ramsey is one of those, super great players who always tries to find that edge, right? Like the elite of the elite guys. So you've got that. Same with Aaron Donald. Okay, he knows people don't doubt him, but he's just got that in his DNA. I mean, you watch him practice. It is like nothing you've ever seen out of a defensive lineman, if maybe a player at any other position. But I think where the Rams are really good is, yes, they are top heavy in terms of having just really talented, exceptional players, the best players at their position. But what the Rams do better than any team in the NFL is they develop guys who you've never really heard of before. I mean, look, they started that game with two backup safeties who played very well. It was Nick Scott who put the smoke on A.J. Green, who forced the incomplete pass, which Sean McVay challenged, which led to that pick six by Kyler Murray. They develop players so well. Like you look at some of the defensive linemen. This guy, Greg Gaines, right? Okay, of course, he's playing next to the kingmaker, Aaron Donald, who gets a lot of attention. But they develop guys. Look at Cooper Kupp, how he developed. So that's another thing that this staff routinely does. Remember, this staff churns. They lose coaches every year. So that's the culture set by Sean McVay. So they are a top-heavy team when it comes, again, to the best players of their positions. But what they do culturally and the way that these guys coach, and that's why Sean McVay is such a good coach. He coaches his coaches to develop players. And that is a hard skill on an NFL calendar to do.
When I look at Mark Davis, I think about Heath Ledger's Joker. Do I look like a guy with a plan? It's like
that was a left turn there, Mike.
No, I'm like, what are they doing? I mean, they just make the playoffs. They're a feel-good story. They overcome all sorts of adversity, which is well documented. Players are clamoring for Rich Bisaccia, and I get it. Players probably shouldn't hire their own boss, whatever. But take us kind of inside. What is he trying to do? I mean, to a certain extent, I can understand wiping the slate clean and not trying to get to saddle your next coach by inheriting a general manager. But that general manager, even if he did not have final say over the roster, the aforementioned John Gruden apparently did, like, Mayock helped build a playoff team. I guess it's just crazy that it wasn't that long ago, Steve. Your former colleague, Mike Mayock, was like the darling of draft weekend and was a guy that, got a GM gig, and all of a sudden he's on the street after a playoff appearance. Or was he not that important to the organization? Just what's going on in Las Vegas?
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, let me preface this. I love Mike Mayock personally. I mean, I worked with him. He's a great human being. One thing about the Raiders is you don't necessarily know all the machinations of what's going on in the building. Before the season, Mark Bedane, their team president, 3 top executives left kind of under some mysterious terms. There were reports that there were some accounting issues going on for years with this organization. So they had a major leadership void there, right? Then Gruden leaves. Okay, then you have everything with, Damon Arnett and Henry Ruggs go down. So Mike Mayock, I think, was always kind of in the crosshairs because some of the players that he drafted, like Cleveland Farrell and a couple other players, high picks, didn't work out right, but were they his or were they Gruden's picks? Only Mark Davis in that building knows, right? But some of the other guys on his docket are Ruggs, are Arnett, some guys like that. They're going to go to his credit, even if John Gruden had that on there. I think Mayock did an incredible job, along with Rich Bisaccia, of putting their arms around the chaos and steadying things. But does Mark Davis think that, okay, that's a short-term hug? Or is that something we can move forward with? And so clearly get rid of Mayock. I think Rich Bisaccia is next in line, and I think it's going to be a clean sweep. I mean, they've had months to try to figure out what to do, and I think they're going to make a clean sweep in how they reorg that
Does he want to just give it all to Harbaugh and just say, like somebody like a Harbaugh, and just say, here, the organization is yours, do with it as you please? Or do they have somebody, a type of coach in mind that they're looking for? It's a tough act to follow is what I'm getting at.
How'd that work out last time? When they gave Gruden. I mean, they gave him the palace. And look, if we didn't know about the emails, he would still have all that authoritative power.
Right.
And so I don't.
And Mayock might be there too.
Correct. So I don't know if Mark Davis felt that was the right formula and they just got, busted for some old dirty emails, or if he wants to have some type of chain of command, get a general manager in here and then let him hire the coach. Again, the Raiders are a hard organization to figure out. And who would that dude be? Would it be Harbaugh? Would it be Brian Flores? Would it be Dan Quinn? You have no idea. Do they want to keep Derek Carr? Everyone I talk to said, be careful about getting rid of Derek Carr. He's a good player, and quarterbacks are hard to find. If you get rid of him, you better have someone. He's an 80-20
guy.
Right. You better have somebody to replace him with who's pretty good if you're trying to compete with a playoff team. So, you can't tear this team down to the studs. They just did make the playoffs. So it's just, I think this is one everyone's keeping an eye on because this is an attractive situation. It's a city where there's incredible growth potential. You've got talent on the roster, and you do have an owner that could pay a lot of bucks and make a commitment to you if he really believes it.
I'm going to ask you a question. Maybe you don't have the answer to it, but just we're going to speculate. The 3 of us will speculate together and come up with an answer. Obviously, we know the league has major issues when it comes to hiring persons of color in important positions, general manager, head coach, even offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, if we're going to be honest about it. And I'm wondering, as we go through another hiring cycle, who do you think is most influential in names being mentioned? Is it owners, which we always say, these owners, or do you think it's I'll call them the shadow general managers, the guys behind the scenes who used to have front office jobs, like the Bill Polians of the world, the consultants who say, hey, go talk to that guy, go talk to that guy. Because the reason I'm asking Steve and Mike is, Raheem Morris, we're talking about the Rams. Raheem Morris, his team was doing this thing last night. I don't think he's got any job interviews.
I think
Mike and I
he does.
He got one. He just got one today, right?
He'll have more.
And we talked with Shalise yesterday, Shalise Young, and she mentioned Pep Hamilton. Those are names that aren't mentioned that often. Who do you think is responsible for getting some of these names out there mentioned that people are talking about as hot candidates?
It's not the owners. I will tell you that right now. The owners, very few of them are plugged into the coaching pipeline. That's why they trust their team presidents search firms, and general managers, very few of whom look like us three. Okay, so that's how come you tend to have the Phi, Beta, whatever pipeline, not the Omega, not the Kappa, not the Sigma pipeline. Okay, you guys get where I'm going with that. And so
we ain't got the Boule in here either. The Boule.
we don't got the Boule. We don't got the links. We don't have anybody
not
in
the
here
links,
like that.
Not the guardsmen.
Not the guardsmen. So no. So that's not where it is, and that's why. Look, you see clubs hire search firms. There are very few search firms owned by people of color that employ people of color. Again, we know the general manager, team president, this. So guys are identified. First off, the owners are like, well, why can't we have someone like Sean McVay? Because look what Zach Taylor's doing. Look what the LaFleurs are doing, right? I want one of those. Instead of saying, well, yeah, I know Jim Caldwell has done it before, and he's developed quarterback, and he won in Detroit, and he won a Super Bowl as an assistant in Baltimore, and he won in Indianapolis. But I want one of those, right? So the people who are in the owner's ear are the ones who he looks like, associates with, and not the people of color. I will tell you this. This is not a league. This is not, when I say league, not an NFL office issue in terms of they have incentivized these teams in every which way they can. These teams have databases. They will call up and say, look, you really need to look at Pep Hamilton as your offensive coordinator. He's developed all these quarterbacks. But then the general manager's like, well, this dude could be a threat or something like this. I don't really want stuff that they don't normally pull. Even Brian Flores, for all the warts he supposedly has, what other head coaches haven't had those, but yet they get another year to work them out? Oh, we're going to sit down and have a powwow with him and the GM, and they're going to work this out because we like the way the things are headed. No, they chose one or the other. And so that's just something that happens to black coaches more often. People could sit there and say, well, what about this? No, this is indisputable. This is indisputable. And, hopefully this changes. There's 8 bites at the apple for head coaches right here. We'll see how many teams, if even only 2 are hired, that brings you up to last year. There's no net gain.
Right.
So I'm really intrigued by this because this is a very, very bad look for the NFL and these owners who supposedly are all about inspiring change, right?
I'm already preparing myself for disappointment. No matter how many names cross the interview wire, just because I could see a world in which 8 organizations make 8 individual decisions that reflect poorly on the 32. Always a pleasure,
and
brother. We appreciate you.
Real quick, guys.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And I won't take long. Real quick. Hey, head coaches are also responsible for this as well because they're the ones who hire their coordinators and they're the ones who push people out. We've seen Andy Reid push Eric Bieniemy, and he's been Heisman, right? Even though Matt Nagy and all these other guys weren't. But too many head coaches do not have coordinators of color or quarterback coaches of color that they could also push in the pipeline to say these guys need to be next. So they're not completely off the hook with this either.
And it's still a huge discrepancy in terms of black coaches on the offensive side of the ball. That's still something that's in the process of changing. We appreciate you, Steve Wyche. Keep up the great work, brother. We'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.